The blizzard of February 1885 killed 31 people in the mining towns of Colorado Territory. The wind came howling down from the peaks at 60 miles an hour, driving snow so thick that men froze within sight of their own front doors. Mine shafts filled with drifts. Cabins collapsed under the weight of the ice. The temperature dropped to 45 below, and the cold found every crack in every wall, stealing warmth from anyone who couldn't keep it out. In the town of Copperfield, the survivors gathered in the only place the cold couldn't reach, deep inside the Gallagher mine, the flooded wreck that everyone had said was worthless. 43 souls huddled in chambers carved from solid rock, warmed by earth that stayed at 55 degrees no matter what the sky did above. The girl who had drained that mine was 17 years old, and she had been right about everything they said was wrong. Nora Gallagher had been orphaned 6 months before the blizzard, in a cave-in that killed her father and her mother both. Patrick Gallagher had been working the lower tunnel when the supports gave way. Mary Gallagher had been bringing him his lunch. They found them together, still holding hands, buried under 1,000 tons of rock that no one would ever move. The mining company abandoned the claim the same week. The accident had breached an underground aquifer, and water was pouring into the tunnels faster than any pump could handle. Within a month, the Gallagher mine was flooded to the entrance, 200 feet of water filling shafts that had taken 10 years to dig. "The claim is yours," the company lawyer told Nora, handing her papers that felt like a cruel joke. "For whatever that's worth, which is nothing, less than nothing, you'll still owe taxes on worthless land." Foreman Silas Crenshaw was there when the papers were signed. He had worked with Nora's father for years, had been the one to tell her that her parents were dead, had been the one to suggest that the company abandon the flooded claim rather than try to save it. "Sell it to the company for salvage," he told her. "We'll give you $50 for the equipment we can recover. That's more than anyone else will pay for a hole full of water. My father spent 10 years digging that mine. And now it's a grave, his grave and your mother's grave, and a grave for anyone foolish enough to go near it. Take the $50, girl. Go somewhere else. Start over." Nora looked at him, at his blackened hands and his calculating eyes, and the way he had already written off everything her father had built. "No," she said. "Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, and whether you've ever inherited something everyone told you was worthless." Nora moved into the cabin above the mine the day after she buried her parents. She had nowhere else to go, no relatives in America, no money for a ticket back to Ireland, no skills that anyone in Copperfield wanted to pay for. The cabin was all she had, and the flooded mine beneath it was the only thing her parents had left her. She spent the first week just staring at the water. It filled the main shaft to within 10 feet of the surface, black and still and cold, hiding everything her father had built. The tunnels below were gone. The ore veins were unreachable. The future her parents had worked toward was drowned. But the water wasn't rising anymore. That was the first thing she noticed. The flood had stopped at a certain level and stayed there, 10 feet below the surface, exactly where the drainage tunnel her father had started would have emerged if he had finished it. That was when old Tomasz found her. He was 83 years old, a Polish mining engineer who had come to Colorado 30 years ago and never left. He had worked every major mine in the territory, had designed drainage systems for claims that everyone said were hopeless, had forgotten more about moving water through rock than most engineers ever learned. "You're the Gallagher girl," he said, appearing at the mine entrance one morning while Nora was studying the water level. "The one with the flooded claim. I'm the Gallagher girl. I don't know what I have. You have a mine that's waiting to be drained." Tomasz walked to the edge of the shaft and looked down at the black water. "Your father was smart. He started a drainage tunnel before the flood. Did you know that? He never finished it." "No, but he got it most of the way. Another 50 feet, maybe 60, and the water would drain out on its own. Gravity would do the work. The mine would empty itself." Nora stared at him. "You're saying I could drain this?" "I'm saying your father already did most of the work. Someone just needs to finish it." Tomasz smiled, and his face creased into 1,000 lines. "The question is whether you're willing to dig 50 feet of tunnel through solid rock." She was willing. She had nothing else. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It helps us bring you more tales of frontier wisdom every week. Tomasz came every day that first autumn, teaching Nora how to read the mountain. He showed her where the drainage tunnel emerged on the hillside below the mine, a narrow opening, barely visible, choked with debris from years of neglect. He showed her how to calculate the angle needed to reach the flooded shaft, how to shore up walls as she dug, how to work alone in a tunnel without dying. "Mining is patience," he told her. "The mountain doesn't hurry. The water doesn't hurry. Only fools hurry underground. Your father knew that. That's why his tunnels were the safest in the valley, until the day they weren't." He taught her things that no engineering school could have taught. The feel of rock that was about to give way, the sound of water moving through stone, the way air changed when you were getting close to an open space. He taught her to trust her hands, her ears, her instincts, the wisdom that came from 50 years of working underground. In Silesia, where I came from, we had mines that had been flooded for generations, Tomasz said one afternoon, as they sat at the entrance to the drainage tunnel eating bread and cheese. "Everyone said they were lost forever, but water follows gravity, always. Find the right path, dig the right tunnel, and the water will leave on its own. It doesn't want to stay trapped any more than we do." Nora learned patience. She dug through the autumn, working by lantern light, carving through rock that her father had planned to carve himself. She hauled the debris out by hand, bucket by bucket, building a pile of broken stone that grew larger every day. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her shoulders ached, then strengthened. Her back learned to bend in ways it had never bent before. She worked 10 hours a day, sometimes 12, sometimes more. She worked until her arms couldn't lift the pickaxe anymore. Then she slept. Then she woke and worked again. She measured her progress in inches. 3 inches today, 4 inches tomorrow, sometimes only 2 on the days when the rock was hardest. The people of Copperfield thought she was mad. They saw her disappearing into the hillside every morning, emerging every evening covered in rock dust and exhaustion. They heard about her plan to drain the flooded mine, and they laughed. Foreman Crenshaw came to see her work in November, bringing a group of miners who wanted to see the crazy orphan who thought she could empty a mountain. "Look at this foolishness," he said, gesturing at the narrow tunnel she had carved. "She's digging toward water that will drown her. She's going to break through into that flooded shaft and die the same way her parents died." The miners laughed. Nora kept digging. "The Gallagher claim is cursed," Crenshaw continued. "It killed her father. It killed her mother. And it'll kill her too if she keeps this up. Mark my words, that mine will never be worked again." It's nothing but a grave now, and she's digging her way into it. Nora set down her pickaxe and turned to face him. Her hands were calloused, her shoulders were strong, and her eyes held something that made Crenshaw take a step backward. "My father believed in this mine," she said. "He spent 10 years building it. He died trying to make it work. You think I'm going to walk away because you say it's cursed? The mine is flooded. The mine is waiting. There's a difference." She picked up her pickaxe and went back to work. The men eventually left, their laughter echoing off the tunnel walls. But some of them weren't laughing anymore. Some of them were looking at the work she had done, at the progress she had made, at the determination that wouldn't quit. Some of them were starting to wonder if maybe the orphan knew something they didn't. The breakthrough came on December 3rd, 1884. Nora was alone in the tunnel, 52 feet from where she had started, when she felt the rock change beneath her pickaxe. It was softer, suddenly, wetter, and she could hear something on the other side. A hollow sound like the echo of a vast, empty space. She had reached the flooded shaft. She didn't break through immediately. That would have killed her. 200 feet of water rushing through a hole barely big enough to crawl through. Instead, she did what Tomasz had taught her. She drilled a small hole, just wide enough for a finger, and she waited. Water began to trickle through. Slowly at first, then faster, then steady, a stream flowing down the drainage tunnel, following the slope she had created, pouring out of the hillside below the mine. The mine was draining itself, just as Tomasz had said it would. It took 3 weeks for the water to empty, completely. 3 weeks of watching the level drop, foot by foot, revealing tunnels that had been submerged for 6 months, or veins that still held silver, chambers carved from solid rock that had never seen daylight since the flood. Nora explored the drained mine carefully, carrying lanterns into spaces that her father had carved and her mother had never seen. She found the tools her father had left behind, pickaxes and shovels and drill bits, still sharp despite months underwater. She found the ore cart he had been loading when the flood came, still half full of silver-bearing rock. She found the lunch pail her mother had been carrying, still sitting on a ledge where the water had deposited it, still containing the bread and cheese that had been meant for a meal that never happened. And deep in those chambers, in the places her father had carved deepest into the mountain, Nora found something she hadn't expected. The earth was warm, not just cool like a cellar, but warm, 55 degrees, steady and constant, no matter how cold the air grew above. The rock itself held heat, stored from summers past, held in the mass of the mountain, like memory held in the mind. The deeper chambers were warmer still, heated by the earth's own fire, by forces that had been working since before humans walked these mountains. Tomasz came to see what she had found, making his way down the drained shaft on ladders Nora had built from salvaged timber. He pressed his palm against the warm rock and closed his eyes, feeling the heat that flowed from the earth itself. "This is what the old miners called the living stone," he said. "The earth that remembers summer, no matter what winter does above. In Silesia, we had mines like this, deep enough that the cold could never reach. People would shelter in them when the worst winters came. The stone held them safe. My father never told me about this. He might not have known. The flood came before he dug this deep. But he was getting close. Another few months, and he would have found what you found." Tomasz smiled, his old face creasing into 1,000 lines of satisfaction. "You finished what he started, and you found what he was looking for, even if he didn't know he was looking for it. Nora had drained a flooded mine. She had discovered a shelter that would never freeze. And she had found the warmth her father had been digging toward all along. If Wild West Retribution has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Your support helps us keep telling stories that remind us what human persistence can accomplish. Winter came hard that year. The first snow fell in late December, and it kept falling through January, piling higher and higher until the drifts reached the roof lines of the mining cabins. The temperature dropped steadily, 20 below, 30 below, 40 below. The world above turned white and deadly, while Nora lived in her mountain, warm and safe. She started preparing for what she knew was coming. She stockpiled food in the chambers where the temperature never changed. She brought in firewood for cooking, even though the stone itself provided enough warmth for survival. She built sleeping platforms along the warmest walls, enough for dozens of people if they were ever needed. Some of the townspeople noticed her preparations and asked what she was doing. She told them the truth. She was making the mine ready to shelter anyone who needed it. They laughed, the way they had laughed at everything she did. But Nora kept preparing anyway. The mine started failing in early February. Shafts filled with ice. Equipment froze solid. Men who had worked underground their whole lives found themselves trapped by cold that no fire could fight. The working mines, the ones Foreman Crenshaw controlled, were too shallow to escape the cold. Their tunnels had been carved for efficiency, not survival. When the temperature dropped far enough, even the earth around them froze. And then the blizzard came. It hit on February 8th, 1885, without warning. A wall of white on the western horizon, a wind that built from a whisper to a scream in less than an hour. By nightfall, people were dying. The cold was a living thing, hunting through every crack, every gap, every weakness in walls that had seemed solid. Cabins that had been warm became ice boxes. Stoves that had always been enough couldn't keep up. People huddled together under every blanket they owned and still felt the cold stealing their lives. Foreman Crenshaw's house was among the first to fail. The wind tore off his roof in the middle of the night, and he barely escaped with his life. He stumbled through the snow toward the company bunkhouse, but the bunkhouse was failing too. Windows shattered, walls buckling, heat bleeding away faster than the stoves could replace it. By dawn of the second day, there was nowhere left to go. Nowhere except the mine that everyone had called cursed. The survivors came in ones and twos at first, then in groups, struggling up the hill toward the Gallagher claim. They came because someone had remembered the orphan girl and her drained mine. They came because they had no other choice. Nora met them at the mine entrance, her face lit by lanterns that burned steady in the still air of the tunnel. "Come in," she said. "There's room." They came in. They felt the warmth that radiated from the walls, 55 degrees, steady and constant, while the world above froze solid. They walked deeper into the mountain, following tunnels that Nora's father had carved, passing through chambers that had been underwater 6 months before. And they wept, not from cold, but from relief, from the simple miracle of being warm when warm seemed impossible. 43 people crowded into the Gallagher mine that night. Men who had laughed at Nora's work. Women who had whispered that she was mad. Children who had been told the mine was haunted by the ghosts of her dead parents. They all came, and Nora took them all in. Foreman Silas Crenshaw was among them. He came on the third day, his face gray with frostbite, his hands too frozen to close. He stood at the entrance to the mine, the claim he had called worthless, the tunnels he had said would kill her. And he couldn't meet her eyes. "Please," was all he said. Nora looked at him for a long moment. She remembered the laughing. She remembered the $50. She remembered being told that her parents' mine was nothing but a grave. "Come in," she said. "There's room." Thank you for watching this story about Nora Gallagher and the flooded mine of Copperfield. If it reminded you of something important, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it today. They stayed for 9 days. 9 days while the blizzard raged and died and the snow settled into drifts that would take months to melt. They shared Nora's food, her water, her warmth. They slept in chambers her father had carved, on floors her mother had walked, in a mine that everyone had said was cursed. The children were the first to stop being afraid. They ran through the tunnels like they were playing in a castle, their laughter echoing off walls that had known nothing but the sound of pickaxes and dynamite. The adults followed slowly, learning to see the mine as Nora saw it, not as a grave, but as a shelter. Old Tomasz came on the 4th day. He had survived the storm in his own way, buried in his cabin under blankets and prayers. But he wanted to see what Nora had built. "Your father would be proud," he said, looking at the chambers full of people, the tunnels warm with life. This is what he was building toward, even if he didn't know it. A mine that could shelter a community, a place where the mountain itself keeps you warm. He never got to see it. No, but you finished what he started. That's what children do. They finish what their parents begin. When the storm finally broke, the survivors emerged to find a changed world. 31 people had died in the mining towns of the valley. Cabins were destroyed. Equipment was ruined. The mining industry itself had been crippled by the cold, but everyone who made it to the Gallagher mine survived. 43 souls who should have frozen were alive because an orphan girl had drained a flooded shaft and discovered warmth that no one knew existed. Foreman Crenshaw stood before the survivors that spring and made a public confession. "I called this mine worthless," he said, his voice rough with shame. "I offered $50 for a claim that's worth more than anything I've ever owned. I told everyone the Gallagher girl was digging her own grave." He paused, looking at the faces of the people he had nearly let die. "I was wrong, about the mine, about the girl, about everything. She saved my life with the claim I said was cursed." He turned to Nora, who stood at the edge of the crowd with Tomasz beside her. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now. Your father built something that's going to outlast all of us, and you finished what he started." Nora looked at him, at the man who had mocked her, who had tried to buy her inheritance for nothing, who had predicted her death with such certainty. "My father believed in this mine," she said. "My mother believed in him. They died trying to build something that would last. I drained that water because I had nowhere else to go and nothing else to lose. But I'm keeping it. I'm making it a shelter for anyone who needs it. Because that's what my parents would have wanted." She looked at the survivors, at the faces that had once laughed at her. "Anyone who wants to learn, I'll teach. The mountain is patient. It'll keep whoever knows how to ask." Nora Gallagher never left Copperfield. She worked the mine for another 40 years, pulling silver from veins that the flood had revealed, creating chambers that could shelter 100 people if needed. She married a young miner named Thomas Brennan, who had been among the survivors and who understood what it meant to be saved by someone else's stubbornness. They raised 5 children in the cabin above the mine, all of whom learned the skills their mother had learned from old Tomasz. The mine stayed at 55 degrees, summer and winter, decade after decade, a constant warmth held in the heart of the mountain. Old Tomasz died the spring after the blizzard, peacefully in his cabin. They buried him on the hillside above the mine with a headstone that said, "He taught her to read the mountain." Foreman Crenshaw resigned his position after that winter. He spent his remaining years helping to develop other mines as emergency shelters, trying to undo the damage his dismissal had almost caused. He died in 1892, and his gravestone, at his own request, said only, "She was right. I was wrong." The phrase Gallagher's mine entered the vocabulary of Colorado, meaning any inheritance that seems worthless until it saves your life. When someone was mocked for seeing value in what others dismissed, the old-timers would shake their heads and say, "Remember Gallagher's mine. Remember the girl who drained a flood." The mine is still there, still warm, still holding its 55 degrees after 140 years. The tunnels Nora's father carved still stand. The drainage tunnel she finished still works. The chambers that sheltered 43 people still wait, ready for anyone who needs them. Some stories end with revenge. This one ends with warmth, steady, patient, eternal, held in the heart of a mountain that remembers summer even when winter tries to kill everything above. Subscribe to Wild West Retribution for more stories of frontier wisdom and quiet vindication. We'll see you in the next one.